Okay, let's dive into a pretty incredible story. We're going to talk about a civilization that mastered water so completely it built a 1400-year empire on it. We're talking about ancient Sri Lanka, and a kingdom that created one of the most sophisticated hydraulic societies the world has ever seen. So, right off the bat, here's the fundamental challenge they were up against. The Anuradhapura kingdom was located in what's known as Sri Lanka's dry zone. Now, that doesn't mean no rain. It means a ton of rain for a few months and then nothing. So, for civilization to not just survive, but actually thrive for over 1,000 years, they needed a truly revolutionary solution. And this was their answer: 30,000. That's the estimated number of reservoirs, or wewa as they're called, that they built. I mean, just let that number sink in. That's almost one reservoir for every single square kilometer of the entire dry zone. This was way more than just irrigation. This was a complete re-engineering of the landscape itself. They created a massive man-made oasis. So first up, let's really look at how this kingdom was quite literally built on water. We're talking a period from 437 BC all the way to 1017 AD. Its incredible longevity was tied directly, and I mean directly, to its ability to solve that water problem. You see, it all came down to one thing: rice. Rice was the engine of their economy. It was the food that fed their people, their monks, their armies. But here's the catch. Trying to grow rice in a climate with these long, punishing dry spells forced the early settlers to become absolute masters of hydrology. It wasn't a choice, it was a matter of survival. And that pressure, well, it sparked an era of unbelievable innovation.
Right, so this need to survive, it didn't just lead to a few clever tricks. It sparked what you could call an ancient hydraulic revolution. And this whole thing was centered on a single technological breakthrough that changed absolutely everything. This wasn't just about digging ponds. We're talking about inventing technology to control massive, and I mean massive volumes of water with incredible precision.
And here it is. This is the key to the whole operation, the Biso Kaltua, or valve pit. It might look simple, but this thing was an absolute game changer. It basically acted like a modern cistern sluice. It let the engineers control the immense water pressure at the bottom of a really deep reservoir. That meant they could release water safely without the whole embankment eroding and collapsing. This one invention unlocked the ability to go big.
Now, to put this into perspective, and you've got to hear this, a British engineer in the 1800s who was studying these ancient systems, he realized that the ancient Sri Lankans were more than 2 millennia ahead of Europe on this. 2,100 years later. That is just an astonishing technological lead.
So you can see how the Biso Kotua let them just scale up their ambitions exponentially. They went from these small village tanks to creating colossal reservoirs with embankments stretching for miles, some of them 50 feet high, holding back billions of gallons of water captured during that short monsoon season. It was enough to last them the entire year.
Okay, so with a guaranteed food and water supply, the kingdom didn't just survive. It entered a golden age. This engineering prowess wasn't just about farming. It was the bedrock upon which they built a really rich and powerful civilization. You know how this story goes, right? An agricultural surplus creates wealth. And that wealth wasn't just sitting around, it was channeled into a cultural explosion. The very same technical skill they used to build reservoirs was now being applied to create these monumental works of art and architecture. And you can see that connection so clearly here. The wealth from all that rice funded the construction of some of the largest structures in the entire ancient world. We're talking stupas like the Jetavana, which actually rivaled the pyramids of Egypt in sheer scale. Engineering power translated directly into cultural and political might. But if there is one single project that just showcases their absolute mastery, it has to be the Jayaganga Canal. It was built way back in the 5th century AD by a king named Dhatusena. And this thing wasn't just a ditch. It was a water superhighway designed with almost unbelievable precision. Get this. That was the gradient. Over its entire 54-mile length, the canal dropped at a rate of just 6 inches for every mile. To maintain such a shallow, consistent slope over that kind of distance, well, it's a feat that still baffles modern engineers, even with all our laser-guided technology. It guaranteed this slow, steady, non-erosive flow of water from one massive reservoir to another. And that, of course, is the big question that's still out there. Without lasers, without GPS, how in the world did they survey the land so perfectly? It just points to this deep,
practical understanding of physics, of hydraulics, and topography that was simply unparalleled in its time.
But here's the paradox, and there's always a paradox, isn't there? The very system that was the kingdom's greatest strength, its source of life and wealth, well, it also became its greatest vulnerability. The entire civilization was tied to this one intricate network of water.
Because the kingdom was so prosperous, it basically painted a giant target on its back. For centuries, it faced repeated invasions from South Indian dynasties. And, these invaders, they eventually learned a crucial lesson. If you want to kill the kingdom, you have to kill its water supply.
And that final invasion by the Chola Empire around the turn of the 11th century was devastating. The ancient chronicles, they describe a really systematic destruction. The invaders didn't just sack the city. They specifically targeted the intricate web of canals and reservoirs, the kingdom's lifeblood. And that was it. The system collapsed. Without water, the agricultural heartland failed completely. The great city of Anuradhapura, which had been a capital for over 1,000 years, just couldn't sustain its people anymore. It was abandoned, and eventually it was reclaimed by the jungle.
So the kingdom of Anuradhapura was gone. End of story, right? Well, not exactly. The genius of its engineers etched into the very landscape of Sri Lanka. That wasn't gone. Their work was built to last. And it did.
But this isn't just ancient history you find in a museum. And this is the amazing part. Many of those same ancient reservoirs are still the backbone of agriculture in the region today. The ruins of the great city are, of course, a protected UNESCO World Heritage Site, and the entire system is now studied as a timeless model for sustainable water management.
Which kind of leaves us with this final thought. In our age of climate change and growing water scarcity all over the world, what can we learn from a civilization that built a 1,400-year empire by mastering the art of collecting and conserving every single drop of rain? It's a pretty big question, and it's definitely worth thinking about.